Human trafficking is not just a distant overseas problem. The issue is here. It's in our communities. It's in our small towns. It's in our big cities.
Many people are among the Somali community in Minnesota.
Tensions are rising in Minnesota after ICE agents detained a 5-year-old boy in Minneapolis on Tuesday.
5:12 a.m. The detention of at least 4 children by ICE in Minneapolis ignited a nationwide smuggling scandal. A powerful governor sold out his own city in exchange for money and protection. A human trafficking route concealed beneath a fortified underground chamber involving 18-year-old students. 3 tons of heroin, fentanyl, and synthetic chemicals being moved into the United States. Do you want to see the truth they tried to hide? Hit like, I'll expose it all. At 5:12 a.m., Minnesota was still asleep. The temperature hovered at -14 degrees Fahrenheit, a bone-cutting cold settling over Summit Avenue, turning the neighborhood into a block of frozen silence. Porch lights glimmered faintly in the winter darkness. Frost coated the walkways. Radio waves were silent. Nothing in the neighborhood signaled an emergency, until it arrived without warning, and everything began to slip off its familiar track. Only the low, heavy rumble of engines tore through the icy night. The shift began rapidly. 3 blocks away, a column of armored vehicles moved quietly into the residential area under an unsettling silence. No sirens, no emergency signals, only cold headlights slicing across the frozen pavement. More than 180 federal agents dismounted at once, wearing heavy body armor, carrying ballistic shields and night vision optics. They fanned out in pre-calculated formations, precise, cold, without a single wasted movement. This was not a routine police patrol. This was a coordinated federal assault. Ahead of them was not an industrial facility or a familiar crime hotspot. It was a large private residence in the middle of a residential neighborhood, maintained so perfectly that it revealed no hint of suspicion. The home belonged to Muhammad Ali Warsaim, 46, a Somalia governor who controlled more than $5.7 billion in state budget authority and oversaw public safety and law and order policy. A familiar face in the media, a symbol of stability, at least on the surface. By 5:52 a.m., the operation officially began. A compressed air blast thundered as the breaching device was activated at the front entrance. Then a flashbang grenade ripped through the silence. The door blew open. A commanding shout echoed throughout the house. "Freeze! Federal agents!" Neighbors jolted awake to screams and the pounding of boots across marble floors. Within minutes, the house was fully secured. But what forced commanders to remain on high alert was not the explosion. It was what was waiting inside. The agents did not encounter chaos or scattered resistance. They came face to face with 14 armed private security guards posted at various points throughout the residence, moving in an organized manner like a paramilitary unit. The number alone raised a serious question. No elected governor requires such a security perimeter in a private home. Within minutes, public trust began to collapse. Inside, agents began counting. $3.7 million in cash, bundled and hidden across multiple rooms. 6 encrypted devices, still active and warm to the touch. A private office revealed structural schematics concealed beneath the basement. The reality became undeniable. A drug storage facility, classified documents tied to trafficking routes, and ledgers fronting a commercial system worth nearly $2 billion. It was the first sign of a much larger chain of exposure, where power granted by the ballot had become a tool for a smuggling network engineered from within. And that morning was only the opening act of what was about to be dragged into the light. If you believe powerful figures are hiding behind the facade of the law to control this smuggling network, tap like, subscribe, and comment "exposed" to continue tracing the concealed trail. To understand why the governor's residence required such strict fortress-level security, investigators had to rewind the timeline, not to a single secret arrangement, but to a chain of reactions that shattered public trust within a matter of hours. Exactly 24 hours before the raid, Minneapolis descended into chaos. During an immigration enforcement operation in a Somali neighborhood, ICE detained at least 4 children along with their parents, including a 5-year-old child. Within minutes, videos spread across the city. Frightened children, parents in handcuffs, neighbors standing frozen in disbelief. By evening, the footage had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times, and emergency hotlines recorded a 300% surge in complaints. Community leaders accused ICE of excessive conduct. Civil organizations issued formal condemnations. Even local police commanders warned that trust in federal authorities was collapsing. In public, the incident was treated as a crisis that needed to be de-escalated. But behind the scenes, it became something entirely different, an opportunity for him. From inside the governor's office, subtle signals began to emerge. Interagency coordination requests stalled. Internal meetings were convened without minutes. Oversight calls went unanswered for 48 to 72 hours, with cases quietly left unattended. In theory, these were routine delays. In reality, they created openings. When analysts reviewed administrative decisions spanning the past 5 years, the network came into sharper focus. Each time, federal enforcement units moved towards sensitive areas, permitting reviews slowed by an average of 19 days. Inspections were rescheduled, and logistical checks were quietly reassigned. No announcements, no signatures, just enough obstruction to create safe gaps. Those gaps were not abstract. Financial and movement data showed that during these pauses, approximately 1.2 tons of narcotics were relocated, and individuals connected to an organized prostitution network were discreetly transferred across jurisdictions. In 9 documented cases, inspections delayed by less than 72 hours resulted in entire sites being cleared. No drugs, no personnel, no trace. What initially appeared to be administrative procedure functioned instead as early warning. The money confirmed it. More than $471 million moved through intermediary accounts linked to the political influence sphere surrounding the governor's office. Funds routed through Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia, precisely timed with decisions that reduced oversight and protected transport corridors. No elected salary could explain even a fraction of that flow. Federal command reached a sobering conclusion. This was not a political dispute. It was coordination. A power broker exploiting a community crisis to weaken oversight, and, in doing so, shielding a drug and prostitution trafficking operation functioning in plain sight. They had identified the focal point. One question remained. If the governor's residence was not the final endpoint, what was still being concealed beyond it? Comment, discover. Your support will strengthen the resolve of United States federal authorities. Federal command was forced to accept a reality that could no longer be ignored. The residence itself was not the destination. It was only a door. 4 hours before dawn, a specialized surveillance unit deployed high-altitude thermal imaging drones over the governor's property. This was not a tool used by routine procedure. It was activated only when conventional observation methods were no longer considered reliable. In this case, the data returned within the first minutes confirmed what investigators had begun to suspect. Behind the detached garage, the frozen ground glowed with abnormal intensity. At 6:41 a.m., agents cleared snow and debris from the anomalous area. Beneath a thick, reinforced concrete slab, expertly disguised with materials identical to the surrounding pavement, they discovered a large-scale hydraulic lift system. When activated, the platform slid back with almost no sound, revealing the entrance to a reinforced tunnel, wide enough to transport industrial cargo, not people. What lay below was not an escape route, it was infrastructure. The tunnel extended more than 25 meters underground, reinforced with steel framing and concrete walls rated to bear loads exceeding 120 tons. High-output LED lighting ran the length of the passage. Ventilation shafts fed air through industrial-grade filtration units. Power lines were routed through multi-layered conduits, connected to a private electrical grid, completely outside municipal oversight. As the search perimeter expanded, the true scale of the site became undeniable. This was no longer a home. It was an underground logistics hub disguised as a mansion. Inside a guest bedroom, concealed behind a false wall, agents discovered 1.8 tons of narcotics, stacked neatly like strategic reserves. Deeper in the basement, metal containers held an additional 3 tons of heroin, fentanyl, and synthetic compounds. Cash appeared everywhere, inside suitcases, sealed containers, and floor safes. When the count was complete, the total seized from the residence alone exceeded $210 million. But the most disturbing discovery was not the money or the drugs. Beneath the frozen ground, agents uncovered a second tunnel branch, directly linked to an organized human trafficking network. Another hydraulic lift, hidden in the garage floor, descended into a fortified underground system designed to operate silently for extended periods, completely detached from life above. At 7:38 a.m., Federal Command elevated the security status to level 4. This was no longer a case of individual corruption. It was a clandestine logistics network embedded deep within civilian life. The tunnels stretched far beneath the property, equipped with lighting, ventilation, and high-capacity conveyor systems. It was not built to flee. It was built to endure. And at that point, the question was no longer about a single individual. If a sitting governor could construct a structure of this scale in the heart of an American city without detection, how many other ordinary homes might be concealing the same kind of machinery? By the time the underground network was fully mapped, Federal Command understood one unavoidable truth. A system of this magnitude could not end beneath a single residence. Infrastructure required an exit, and exits always left measurable trails. While tactical teams secured the tunnels, a parallel operation unfolded above ground. Analysts traced the flow outward. Power consumption spikes, freight schedules, zoning exemptions, and traffic data across a 9-mile radius. What emerged was not disorder, but engineering-level precision. Less than 3.8 miles from the residence, a commercial logistics corridor operated quietly along a rail and highway junction, moving over 14,000 containers per month. On paper, it was routine. Cold storage units, bonded warehouses, freight transfer yards. In practice, it was the pressure valve. Shipping manifests exposed the anomaly. Containers flagged for secondary inspection were cleared with unusual speed. Timestamps showed approvals issued during overnight windows when staffing dropped by 62%. In 17 documented cases, cargo cleared security in under 8 minutes, a process that normally required 2 to 4 hours. The camouflage was deliberate. Pallets of frozen produce, medical disposables, construction composites. Each shipment blended into normal commerce. Once released, trucks split into smaller convoys within 22 minutes, dispersing loads across multiple routes. No single vehicle carried more than 3% of the total volume. Financial records closed the loop. 36 shell logistics firms, all compliant on paper, rotated billing responsibilities. Payments were fragmented into transfers under $48,000, timed minutes apart. Over a 26-month period, the system moved more than $1.1 billion without triggering a single automated freeze. This was not smuggling by chance. It was distribution by design. By 8:14 a.m., Federal Command issued a regional containment order. Highway patrol units activated rolling stops across 5 interstate corridors. Rail authorities suspended outbound manifests. Port of entry databases were locked down. Within 90 minutes, 112 vehicles were flagged, 27 detained, and 6 facilities placed under federal control. Because networks like this do not rely on one house. They rely on scale, routine, and silence. And for years, all 3 had operated without interruption. Until that morning. By mid-morning, the network began to fail in ways its architects had never planned for. Systems built on silence cannot survive exposure. As containment orders took effect, arrests followed in rapid succession. Dozens of operatives connected to logistics, storage, and financial routing were taken into custody within hours. Bank accounts were frozen. Properties were sealed. Vehicles were impounded at checkpoints that had not existed the night before. What had moved quietly for years was now visible and vulnerable. The first statements came quickly. Faced with overwhelming evidence, lower-level coordinators began to talk. They described a structure that rewarded obedience and punished hesitation. Instructions were delivered indirectly. Payments arrived fragmented. Responsibility was always diluted. No one was meant to see the whole picture, except those at the very top. That protection evaporated the moment the tunnels were exposed. Licenses were suspended across multiple agencies. Warehouses that had operated without scrutiny were shuttered. Contracts once approved without question were placed under emergency review. Within 72 hours, a system that had taken years to assemble unraveled piece by piece. But the most significant collapse was not logistical. It was institutional. Public trust, once assumed to be stable, had been exploited as camouflage. Titles had shielded actions. Procedure had replaced accountability. The investigation revealed how authority, when left unchecked, could be repurposed into a tool of concealment rather than service. Federal Command made one point clear in its final briefing. This operation was not the end. It was a correction, because the danger was never confined to one residence, one tunnel, or one official. It lived in the assumption that power did not need to be questioned. That assumption no longer held. As the city absorbed the aftermath, one lesson remained unmistakable. Transparency is not optional. It is the only barrier between governance and abuse. If you believe accountability should apply to everyone, especially those entrusted with authority, stay with us. The documents are still being released, and the full story is still coming. What happened in Minneapolis was not just the collapse of a criminal network, it was the exposure of a dangerous illusion. The belief that authority, once granted, no longer needs to be questioned. This investigation did not begin with a tunnel, a warehouse, or a shipment. It began with trust. Trust in uniforms, trust in titles, trust that the systems designed to protect the public could never be turned inward. What these events revealed is how easily that trust can be misused when oversight weakens and silence becomes routine. The structures uncovered were not built overnight. They were assembled patiently, hidden behind paperwork, procedures, and respectability. Every delayed inspection, every ignored warning, every unexplained approval created space for something far darker to grow. And by the time it surfaced, the damage was already measured in lives, not just numbers. This story is not about one city or one official. It is about a principle that applies everywhere. Power without accountability always seeks cover, and when it finds it, the consequences reach far beyond a single address or investigation. Transparency is not a slogan. It is a safeguard. It is the difference between governance and abuse, between service and exploitation. When it disappears, even the most ordinary places can conceal extraordinary harm. As more records are released and proceedings continue, one thing is clear: the truth does not stay buried forever. It surfaces through persistence, scrutiny, and the refusal to look away. If you believe accountability should apply to everyone, especially those entrusted with authority, stay with us. Share this story. Subscribe for updates. And remember, vigilance is not suspicion, it is responsibility.